What's good, everybody? In this video, I'm going to show y'all how you can make simple placement ready beats completely from scratch. I'll be taking y'all step by step, all the way from crafting the melodies till the final process beat. And if you want to catch every single gem in this video, be sure to watch all the way to the end. And with all that being said, let's just jump right into the beat.
Roll up, Tess.
So jumping into the first arrangement, you can see that this melody is insanely simple, and it's literally just 3 layers for this first part. So the first sound that I grabbed was this cinematic grand piano from Keyskate. I wanted to get a piano sound that was really full and that had a little bit of reverb to it, just so it brings a lot of energy to the sound. So I got a tempo of 157 beats per minute, and I took that piano sound and I laid down some super simple bass notes. So I went down to the D3 note. I made a 4 measure long note and just copied it over. Then once I had all of those, I selected it and then held shift click and dragged it down an octave and lowered these velocities a little bit, as you can see on the bottom. Now that we got the bass notes established, I moved on to the second sound in the melody, which is the lo-fi key from Analog Lab. For this, you could use a high piano, a string, pretty much anything else melodic that you'd want to. But the whole point of this is we want to put a super simple counter melody on top of what we already have with the bass notes. So basing this off of the last pattern, the key of this beat is D minor. So if I lay out the D minor scale behind it, you can see pretty much how this sits. As for the actual notes, I'm pretty much only using 5 different notes. To be more specific, the second and third notes in the scale, so in this case E and F, and the 5th and 6th notes in the scale, which is A and A sharp. For dark beats, you really want to utilize the notes in the scale which are only a half step apart or right next to each other on the piano roll. It creates a more dark and mysterious vibe for the rest of the beat. So just play around with the different note lengths and come up with a super simple and catchy top melody. So for a catchier melody, you want to establish an original basis of notes. So as you can tell on all the odd measures, I pretty much have the same first 3 notes where I go from F, E, and then D, the only exception being in the 5th measure where I move the D down to A. And if we look at all the even measures, pretty much all of these are different. So we have the same setup in the odd measures, and the response in the even measures is a little different between each one. This will make it so that your melody isn't too simple to where it gets boring, but it's also not super complicated to where it isn't catchy anymore. So for my last VST sound, I got this children's choir preset from Omnisphere, and once again I just put in a super simple counter melody. This almost plays a call and response role with the previous melody, but this one just kind of accents it here and there. I don't really use it too often in the final beat, and it's pretty much just using those same first 3 notes from the previous patterns. Instead of using A or A sharp as my resolve note, I set it as G instead, just to create a little bit of variation. So putting all those VST sounds together, this is what the original melody sounds like. So once I had this whole thing arranged, I selected all of it. Then I went to the master track, turned all the effects off, armed it, and then hit Alt-R on my keyboard, put on song selection and hit start to render it out. Once I had that, I broke up the stems again and I put it into a new arrangement where I added an accent and the drums. And in the audio settings, I set the mode to stretch and I put the pitch up by 100 cents. The reason why I set my audio clip to stretch is because if I decide to change the tempo, I want the length of the sample to remain the same. Before I add anything else, this is what those first 3 melodies sound like pitched up. You can see that I adjusted the gain or the loudness on the key and the choir. I made them both a little bit quieter just so they sit better in the mix. Then the next thing I grabbed was this accent, which is from me and my boy Double M's multi-kit, first link in the description. And I also pitched this accordingly to the key of the sample. With these 2 put together, I effectively just pitched it down by 4 half steps. And this shares the same principle with the key melody. I just wanted something simple and catchy that goes along with it. You'll see later in the breakdown that this actually rides really well with the bounce of the drums. Then I copied this over and I clicked on the top left and hit make unique. For this audio clip, I have all the same settings. The only difference is I reset the pitch back here. So the only difference between this clip and the last one is that this one is an octave higher than the previous one. And I also reversed it too. So far, this is pretty much what our sample sounds like. I didn't really put any effects on any of these sounds. They're pretty much just as is. Now that we've got all the melodics down, let's finally move on to the drums. Pretty much all these drum sounds except for the open hats are from my upcoming multi-kit, so stay tuned for that. I'll have that out probably either next week or the week after. And if you're watching in the future, it's probably out. Link will be in the description. For my drum sounds, I tried to keep these on the harder hitting side because I wanted to fit the dark vibe that I was really going for, especially that little Durk type of vibe. So my first sound that I got was this clap. Similar to most simple trap patterns, I just put this down on the third beat of every measure. Keeping up with the theme of the rest of the beat, I kept it real simple. Now moving on to the hi-hats, I just put down some two-step hats and just threw in a few different rolls. To put down some two-step hats, all you have to do is go to your hi-hat channel, right click on it and hit fill each two steps, and that'll give you a pattern that looks like this. As for the rolls, I'm using the 1/3 step snapping, and I went and took the paintbrush tool and painted all these in. All I pretty much did is I held shift and clicked and dragged with the paintbrush. So as I moved my paintbrush down, it also dragged down the notes with it. If I didn't hold shift, it would just do this, which is how I painted it this roll in the third measure. And then for this roll right here, you can see that I'm skipping every other grid line. This is also the same thing as going to the 1/6 beat snapping and just putting it on every grid line. I only made the first half of this pattern. I only selected the first half by right clicking this top bar here and then duplicating it over, moving this roll up here and then deleting this one. After that, I went and grabbed my snare sound, and for this I just put in a basic counter snare pattern where I have a note hitting on the end of the first beat on all of the even measures, and also just threw in this snare hit a beat before on the hits on the 4th and the 8th measures just to make it a little bit different. After that, I put down my open hat, and this just hits on the 4th beat on the 2nd and 6th measures. Once we start getting into this territory, when we start adding open hats and perks, you just want to find the gaps in the rest of the beat. Ideally, you don't want these to interfere with other drum sounds because you want plenty of space not only for the rest of the beat, but also for an artist to rap on. If you add too many open hats, perks, or just drum sounds in general, in a lot of cases, it's going to make it really hard to flow on. There aren't really any other drum sounds within 2 beats of it, outside of the 2-step hi-hats of course. Then I took that same open hat sound and I reversed it. And I put this on the 1st and the 5th measures, and that's because I don't really have any drum sounds outside of the 2-step hats on these. I wanted to create like a setup and a resolution for not only the melodics but also the drums too. So this is a setup for both the clap on the same measure that is placed and also the open hat that I showed y'all in the last pattern. And then for my last sound, I got my 808, and for this I kept it super simple. For the 808, you can make it more complicated to your liking. For this specific beat, I just wanted to keep it super simple, so I just kept it down on the root note. I pretty much just made the first 4 measures and just copied it over. The primary places where it hits are on the first beat on this first measure, the second beat on your second measure, then another hit 1.5 beats from this one. Then I took that, copied it over, deleted the second note, and lengthened that one. Then I just duplicated that again, and that's literally my 808 pattern right there. So once I had all of those, I put all the drums in sequence here, and I pretty much just kept it constant throughout the whole beat. If you don't want it to get too stale, what you can do is take some of the melodic components out here and there, and you can also take some drum sounds out. So as you might notice, some of these hi-hat clips have chunks taken out of them. And alternatively, what you can do is you can delete some of the auxiliary drum sounds like your open hats or your perks that you might add, and just experiment around with which ones you want to take out. What some producers will do with their beats is they'll just cut out all the sounds except for the 808s and the melodics. Sometimes they'll cut out the 808s and play the rest of the drum sounds. So just play around with that to your liking, and also don't make too many frequent changes in the drums. Don't cut out the drum sounds once every 8 measures. A good way to gauge this is either to put an acapella on it or just try to freestyle over it yourself. So this is pretty much what the beat sounds like before I do the finished render. Now that we pretty much got this beat done, what I'm gonna do is go to the master track here, enable all my mastering effects for the beat. Once again, I'm gonna go here, arm the master track, and then hit Alt R, put the mode to full song, and then hit start to render out the entire beat. So once I have that, I'm gonna go up to the arrangement and then hit add one. In here, I'm gonna drag and drop my sample into the playlist, and then I'll take this and route it to its own mixer track, and I'm gonna open up a plugin called Deep Blue Tape Stop. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a tape stop with this beat and then reverse it to create a tape start effect. So before I do that, I'm gonna disarm my mastering effects. I'm just gonna play around with how fast or how slow I want my tape start to be. So I'm gonna leave my declicking at 64, and I'm going to put my slowdown to about 0.12. Then I'm just gonna make an arbitrary playlist selection selection, go back here and then right click on the trigger and hit create automation clip. Then what I'm gonna do is just put this all the way to 100 and just adjust the slowdown knob until I get a tape start that I like. Alright, so I'm liking this right here at about 0.06. Just go to the mixer track for this beat, arm it, and render out the song selection. Once I have that, I'm going to mute the automation clip and then go back to the mixer track and turn off the tape stop plugin. I'm gonna move this over to about 5 right here, then double click on my tape stop, hit reverse on it, and then what I wanna do is I wanna sync up these waveforms so that there's a zero crossing moment right here, so it syncs up well when the first 808 hits. So that's fine and all, but I feel like this first part right here is kind of hard. So I'm going to shorten this clip a little bit and roll off the volume a little bit. I might go back and fine tune that a little bit, but I'm going to throw my tag on it and I'll pretty much have my finished beat. And to really fine tune my mix, I'm actually going to go back and turn off all of these except for my soft clipper. And I'm going to open up another Maximus just to make this hit a little bit harder. And I'm just going to go to Master Aid and put the bands relatively flat. Then I'm going to go back to the monitor, put this mode to off and adjust this post knob to my liking.
Roll up, test.
I think I got it at a level that I like, so I'm gonna move it back to comp off, and this is pretty much what the final beat's gonna sound like.
Roll up, test.